The morning of the birthday party started like any other sunny day in 1932, with a warm Pennsylvania breeze carrying the scent of blooming flowers through the small town. The Miller family's backyard was decorated with colorful balloons, ribbons, and a long wooden table stacked high with homemade treats, cakes, pies, and cookies arranged meticulously. Tommy, Lila, and Benny, the three cousins, were bubbling with excitement, their laughter echoing off the neighboring houses. Their parents and relatives moved between the kitchen and the yard, making sure everything was perfect for the children's special day. At first glance, it was the picture of innocence, a small-town family celebration full of joy and life. The children played games on the neatly mowed lawn, running barefoot across the grass as neighbors looked on with smiles. Hide-and-seek became their favorite, and soon the backyard was filled with squeals of delight. But even amid the laughter, some neighbors began to notice small oddities. A shadow that didn't seem to belong, the faint rustling of bushes when no wind blew, and a sudden silence whenever the children disappeared behind the tall oak tree. Nobody paid it much attention at first, chalking it up to imagination or the kids' own mischievous antics. Yet, an uneasy feeling began to settle over the adults, a tiny seed of worry they couldn't quite shake. As the afternoon progressed, the air grew warmer, and the sunlight cast long, distorted shadows across the yard. The children's game of hide-and-seek grew more adventurous, with each cousin daring the others to go further into the trees that bordered the backyard. Tommy giggled as he ducked behind a low fence, while Benny climbed a tree trunk to get a better vantage point. Lila disappeared behind a thick hedge, her laughter fading into a faint echo. The adults called out to the children, but their voices seemed swallowed by the vastness of the backyard. A sense of foreboding crept in, though no one could articulate why. Suddenly, the laughter stopped. The yard, once alive with noise, fell eerily silent. The adults exchanged nervous glances, wondering if the kids had gotten bored or gone indoors. But the silence lingered longer than any child's playful disappearance should. Panic began to bubble as the parents frantically searched the backyard, calling out names. Each corner, each bush, and every tree was inspected, but there was no sign of Tommy, Lila, or Benny. The swings swayed gently in the breeze, and a kite still tangled in the fence flapped slowly, almost mocking the sudden absence of the children. By the time the sun began to dip behind the horizon, casting an orange glow over the lawn, the backyard had transformed from a place of laughter into a scene of anxiety. The neighbors, who had once watched from their porches with smiles, now hovered nervously, whispering theories and sharing worried looks. The children, who had entered the day with sparkling excitement, had vanished without a trace. And as darkness crept closer, the sense of dread grew heavier, settling over the town like a shadow. What had started as a joyful celebration now felt like the opening chapter of a nightmare nobody could yet understand. The moment the parents realized the children were missing, the backyard erupted into chaos. Chairs toppled over, birthday decorations fluttered in the wind, and grown adults ran from one corner of the yard to the other, calling out frantic names. Tommy, Lila, Benny. Each voice echoed against the houses and trees, but the only answer was silence. Panic began to spread like wildfire through the small neighborhood. Neighbors rushed over, drawn by the shouts, and immediately joined the search. Flashlights weren't common in every household in 1932, but lanterns and candles were lit, casting flickering shadows across the yard. As the search expanded beyond the backyard, the tension intensified. Families combed the nearby streets and alleyways, shouting into the evening air. Some adults checked the barns, sheds, and even the nearby creek, fearing the children might have wandered off in playful curiosity. But there was nothing, no footprints, no signs of struggle, nothing to explain the sudden disappearance of three happy, lively kids. Even the family dog, usually the first to sense trouble, barked and whimpered, refusing to leave the spot where the children had last been seen. The sense of dread deepened with every passing minute, gnawing at the hearts of everyone involved. By nightfall, the small-town police had been called in. Patrolmen with lanterns and whistles combed the surrounding woods and streets, their boots crunching against fallen leaves and dirt paths. The town had never experienced anything like this. Families gathered at the Miller home, clutching one another, whispering theories in hushed, terrified tones. Some suggested the children had been kidnapped. Others feared something far worse, something the human mind wasn't meant to imagine. Every passing hour seemed to make the night grow darker, not just with shadows, but with the creeping realization that the children might never be found. Rumors began to swirl among neighbors as fear settled like a heavy fog over the town. A few people claimed they saw strange figures lurking near the edge of the yard earlier that afternoon, Others swore they heard children's laughter coming from the woods only to vanish abruptly. Old-timers spoke of mysterious disappearances from decades past, tales that had long been buried in memory. The mixture of past legends and current terror created a storm of unease. Parents whispered frantic warnings to one another, the laughter from earlier that day now a haunting memory, replaced by trembling uncertainty. As midnight approached, the situation grew increasingly desperate. Search parties moved further from the house, into the thick woods surrounding the small town, their lanterns bobbing like tiny fireflies in the darkness. Each snap of a branch, each rustle of leaves, sent shivers down spines. The town that had once been filled with simple joys and quiet evenings was now gripped by fear. And yet, despite hours of searching, shouting, and scouring every corner of the neighborhood, there was no sign of Tommy, Lila, or Benny. The night stretched on, and the reality sank in. Something unthinkable had happened, and nobody could explain how 3 children could vanish so completely. The local police wasted no time. They arrived with notebooks, lanterns, and a determination to solve what had already become the most baffling case the town had ever seen. Officers questioned everyone who had attended the party, from neighbors to distant relatives, trying to piece together the events of that fateful afternoon. Every answer seemed to lead to a dead end. Witnesses remembered hearing laughter, seeing the children run, but no one could explain where they had gone or what had happened in those critical moments when the game of hide-and-seek turned into a nightmare. Investigators scoured the surrounding woods, searching every hollow, creek, and thicket. Horses and search dogs were brought in to follow any possible trail, but even trained animals could not detect a scent. Each turn of the investigation only deepened the mystery. Some searchers reported fleeting shadows in the tree line, or glimpses of figures that vanished as quickly as they appeared. These sightings sparked fear, but they offered no concrete evidence. For weeks, the town waited with bated breath as the search continued, and with each day that passed without results, hope began to fade. Meanwhile, newspapers across Pennsylvania picked up the story. Headlines screamed in bold letters, 3 children vanish without a trace, and small-town mystery confounds police. Readers were captivated and horrified by the tale, sharing stories and speculating wildly about what could have happened. Some wrote of abductions, others of wandering into a hidden cave, and a few even suggested something far more sinister. The media attention intensified the pressure on investigators, but no matter how many leads they followed, the children remained missing. Each dead end only heightened the sense that something unimaginable had occurred. As the weeks turned into months, investigators revisited the Miller home countless times. They searched the attic, basement, and every closet. They examined the trees, fences, and gardens with magnifying glasses, looking for anything out of place, anything that might hint at foul play. Yet, each examination produced nothing. The police were baffled, and the community grew restless. Fear turned into obsession. Some neighbors began locking their doors at night, convinced that whoever, or whatever, had taken the children might still be nearby. Even the bravest adults felt a gnawing anxiety, a dread that clung to them like a shadow. In the end, the first investigation closed without answers, leaving a deep scar on the town. The children's disappearance became a topic whispered about in every household, a question that haunted adults and frightened young ones. Families remained vigilant, afraid that history might repeat itself. Despite their best efforts, the early investigations failed to uncover any clues, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant. The case grew colder with every passing day, becoming a mystery that would linger in the town's memory, a puzzle that not even the most determined police officers of the era could solve. As the years passed, the disappearance of Tommy, Lila, and Benny slowly transitioned from an active investigation to a lingering shadow over the town. The Miller home changed hands multiple times, each new family unaware of the dark history lurking in the backyard. But locals never forgot. Whispers followed the property like a persistent chill, and children were warned never to wander too close. The trees that had once provided playful hiding spots now seemed menacing, their branches twisting in strange ways under the wind, almost like silent witnesses to an unsolved crime. The yard that had once been filled with laughter became a place of hushed dread. Generations grew up hearing the story, told in bits and pieces by parents and neighbors who had lived through it. The town's folklore transformed the children into ghostly figures, haunting the edges of the imagination. Teachers would tell the story during history lessons as a cautionary tale. Parents shivered when recounting the events, emphasizing the importance of vigilance and obedience. Even with the passage of time, the town never stopped looking for answers. Every once in a while, Someone thought they caught a glimpse of shadows moving in the Miller yard, or faint laughter echoing on a windless night. These fleeting moments only reinforced the chilling reputation of the house. Meanwhile, official records of the case sat untouched in local police archives. Files yellowed with age, photographs faded, and handwritten notes collected dust. Occasionally, the documents would be glanced at by a new generation of officers, but without any fresh leads, the case grew colder. The children's faces, once vibrant in birthday photos, became solemn reminders of a mystery that had no resolution. The town had learned to live with it, but the unease never faded. It lingered like a shadow that stretched over every birthday, every celebration, reminding everyone that happiness could vanish in an instant. In the wider world, the story of the missing cousins was almost forgotten. Newspapers that once screamed about the case were long gone, and public attention had shifted to other events, other tragedies. Yet, for the families directly affected, there was no moving on. Milestones came and went, holidays passed, and birthdays continued, but without the children, the void remained. Their disappearance was a wound that never healed, a haunting memory that the small town carried into each new decade. The story lived not in news clippings or police reports, but in the whispers and uneasy glances of everyone who had known them. By the time the 1980s rolled around, the Miller backyard had become overgrown, almost unrecognizable from the cheerful party scene of 1932. The swings were rusted, the once colorful fence had faded to gray, and the oak tree loomed like a silent sentinel over the empty yard. Locals avoided it, leaving it to the wind and the creeping vines, but the legend persisted. Every new resident who heard the story felt a chill when they stepped onto the property. And though nearly 50 years had passed since the children vanished, the town could not escape the shadow of that summer day, nor the unanswered questions that had grown more unsettling with every passing decade. Decades later, the case of the missing cousins was almost entirely forgotten by the outside world, but the FBI had never closed the file completely. In 2025, while digitizing old archives, an agent stumbled upon a dusty, unmarked box labeled Unsolved 1932 Cases, Pennsylvania. Inside were photographs, old maps, handwritten notes, and even letters from residents of the town, all meticulously preserved but long ignored. The images of Tommy, Lila, and Benny, frozen in their birthday best, were haunting. The maps marked areas that had been thoroughly searched at the time, yet one corner of the town, near an abandoned warehouse, had never been properly investigated. This overlooked lead would reignite the case in ways no one expected. The discovery sparked immediate interest among a team of modern investigators. Unlike the 1930s detectives, they had access to cutting-edge technology, DNA analysis, forensic mapping, and crime reconstruction tools. Each item in the dusty box was analyzed with meticulous care. The handwritten notes, once dismissed as irrelevant scribbles, revealed patterns suggesting that the children had not wandered away on their own. The maps included subtle markings, symbols that indicated someone had been keeping track of the children's movements. Even the photographs showed shadows and anomalies that had never been noticed before. The case, cold for nearly a century, began to pulse with new, terrifying possibilities. For the first time in 93 years, investigators had a tangible lead that suggested the disappearance was intentional. The abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town became the focal point. Local historians confirmed it had once been owned by a man with a questionable reputation, someone who had been largely forgotten in public records. His movements, business dealings, and personal life were scrutinized. Documents hinted at the warehouse being a clandestine hideout of sorts, a place where someone could operate in secrecy. Suddenly, what had been considered a small-town tragedy began to feel far more sinister, with the chilling possibility that the children had been lured away deliberately. The team also discovered personal items of the children tucked into the box, a ribbon from Lila's hair, a small toy belonging to Benny, and a tiny party hat worn by Tommy. These objects had been stored carefully, almost as if someone had intended them to be found decades later. For the FBI agents, these items were both a clue and a reminder of the human cost. They began to piece together the movements of the children on that fateful afternoon, reconstructing the final moments before their disappearance. The story that had been only whispers and rumors now had a concrete direction, pulling the investigators deeper into a chilling puzzle. With each passing day, the investigation gained momentum. The once-forgotten lead, buried in an archive for nearly a century, became the key to uncovering the truth. Modern technology allowed the agents to map the area with precision, analyze soil samples, and detect disturbances in the abandoned warehouse that would have been invisible in 1932. Every new discovery added layers to the mystery. Faint markings on the walls, signs of long-forgotten furniture, and traces that suggested the warehouse had been used to conceal someone or something. For the first time since that fateful birthday, hope mingled with dread, as the investigation began to edge closer to revealing the horrifying reality behind the disappearance of Tommy, Lila, and Benny. The FBI team approached the abandoned warehouse cautiously, the air thick with decades of dust, decay, and the weight of untold secrets. The building had long been forgotten, its wooden beams rotted, windows shattered, and the doors barely hanging on rusty hinges. But inside, the agents felt an immediate sense of unease, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing stacks of old crates, broken furniture, and the remnants of a long-abandoned life. Every corner seemed to whisper the names of Tommy, Lila, and Benny, their presence lingering in the stillness. It was a false wall near the back of the warehouse that finally drew the team's attention. One agent tapped it, and the sound was hollow, a hollow that hinted at a hidden space beyond. With careful effort, they pried the panels apart and revealed a small, enclosed room that had remained untouched for 93 years. The room was hauntingly preserved. Dust coated every surface, but nothing had been disturbed for nearly a century. In the dim light, the investigators could make out old children's toys, tattered blankets, and hand-drawn sketches on the walls, drawings of birthday cakes, stick figures, and something far darker, crude depictions of confinement, fear, and despair. The personal belongings of the children were there, too. Tiny shoes, a doll with a missing eye, and bits of ribbon hinted at the lives that had been stolen. But the most chilling aspect of the room was the evidence of captivity. A few rusted chains bolted into the wooden floor, marks on the walls that suggested furniture had been moved repeatedly, and faint scorch marks, possibly from candles or lamps that had been used in the darkness. Forensic experts on the team began carefully documenting everything, photographing each item, and taking samples for testing. The room seemed frozen in time, a monument to an evil long hidden yet never forgotten. As the investigation continued, agents discovered journal entries tucked into the cracks of the walls, yellowed and brittle but legible. The entries described someone watching the children, tracking their movements, and then bringing them to the warehouse. The handwriting was erratic, at times frantic, revealing the twisted mindset of a person who had been obsessed with control and secrecy. Every word sent a chill down the spines of the investigators, painting a horrifying picture of what had transpired that summer day in 1932. For the first time, the team could understand the scope of the crime. This was no random disappearance. It had been calculated, cruel, and deliberate. Even as the agents processed the room, an almost tangible presence seemed to linger. The air felt colder, heavier, as if the fear and sorrow of the children had seeped into the walls themselves. Some of the team reported sudden, unexplained chills, while others claimed to hear faint giggles or whispers in the corners of the room. It was a moment that blurred the line between reality and the haunting echoes of the past. Each discovery brought them closer to understanding the horrifying truth, but it also left them with a gnawing sense of dread. The warehouse, once just a forgotten building on the edge of town, had become a silent witness to a crime that had shocked generations, a chilling reminder of innocence lost and secrets buried too long. When the FBI released their findings, the news sent shockwaves across the country. Headlines blared across newspapers, websites, and television screens. 3 children missing for 93 years, hidden warehouse reveals horrifying truth. For decades, the story had been a small-town legend, whispered among locals, but now the entire nation confronted the reality of what had happened. People were horrified that a crime so calculated and cruel could go undetected for nearly a century. Families everywhere felt a shiver of recognition, imagining how easily a happy celebration could turn into a nightmare. Historians, true crime experts, and investigators pored over the evidence with intense scrutiny. Scholars debated how such a crime could have remained hidden for so long, questioning the failures of early investigations and the limitations of 1930s forensic methods. Documentaries, podcasts, and news specials quickly emerged, dissecting the details of the case. Interviews with surviving family members revealed decades of grief and unanswered questions. They spoke of birthdays passed in silence, of anniversaries marked by sorrow, and of the haunting void left by Tommy, Lila, and Benny. The story resonated far beyond the small Pennsylvania town, gripping the imagination of a nation. The psychological impact on the community was profound. Townspeople who had grown up with the story revisited their memories, recalling strange sightings, whispered warnings, and eerie coincidences that had once been dismissed as imagination. Parents became hyper-aware of their children's safety, schools implemented stricter supervision, and local authorities received renewed interest in unsolved cases. The warehouse, once forgotten and decaying, became a site of morbid fascination. Experts described it as a time capsule of horror, perfectly preserved evidence of innocence stolen and lives forever altered. Across social media, people debated every detail, sharing theories about the culprit, the motivation, and the chilling foresight of the crime. Some suggested the children had been part of a twisted ritual. Others claimed it was the work of a disturbed individual acting alone. The photographs, toys, and journal entries found in the warehouse were analyzed frame by frame, sentence by sentence. Every new discovery added another layer of fear and disbelief. Audiences nationwide were gripped by the story's sheer audacity. How could a crime so heinous remain hidden for nearly a century, only to shock the world decades later? Even law enforcement agencies outside of Pennsylvania were drawn into the discussion. The case became a touchstone for cold case investigations, prompting departments to re-examine long-forgotten files in the hope of uncovering other hidden crimes. The FBI's revelation not only solved one of the nation's most haunting mysteries but also reminded the public that evil could linger unnoticed and that the past could resurface in ways that shook even the most modern, secure society. The disappearance of Tommy, Lila, and Benny, once a forgotten tragedy, now commanded the attention of the nation, leaving every reader, listener, and viewer with a chilling question. How many other secrets lay hidden, waiting to be uncovered? As the investigation closed this chapter of the mystery, one chilling truth remained. The world may never fully know what happened in that small Pennsylvania town back in 1932. The laughter that once filled the Miller backyard, the joy of balloons and birthday cake, was replaced by silence that stretched across generations. The warehouse, hidden in plain sight for decades, had finally revealed the horror, but it also reminded the nation that darkness can linger quietly, waiting for the right moment to resurface. The story of Tommy, Lila, and Benny is more than a cold case solved. It's a haunting reminder of innocence lost and secrets buried too long. Families everywhere were left reflecting on the fragility of life and the importance of vigilance even in the most ordinary places. The echoes of that fateful birthday party still whisper through the trees, the shadows of the past brushing against the present, daring us to remember. Even now, the questions remain. Were there others involved? Could the tragedy have been prevented? And what else might still be hidden, waiting to be uncovered by those brave, or curious, enough to look? The answers may never come, but the fear, the mystery, and the story of those 3 missing children will continue to haunt the imagination of anyone who dares to hear it. And so, the legacy of that birthday party lives on, a dark tale whispered across decades, a reminder that even the most joyful celebrations can hide the deepest nightmares. The world watched, horrified and captivated, as the FBI's discovery brought light to a darkness that had lasted 93 years, and the story will never be forgotten.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.